David Cameron has full briefing on UK terror threat. Prime Minister David Cameron has had a full briefing from security and intelligence chiefs following last week's attacks in France. They reviewed the Paris atrocities, which left 17 people dead, and the risks to the UK of a similar attack. It was agreed relevant agencies should consider building elements of the Paris attacks into future training exercises. Meanwhile, a parliamentary human rights watchdog has raised concerns about the government's counter-terrorism bill. The UK's terror threat level remains at severe, meaning an attack is highly likely, one below the highest critical level, which would suggest an attack is imminent. After the meeting, Mr. Cameron tweeted, "We discussed ensuring the UK is properly protected from the terrorist threat." A Note 10 spokesman said the Prime Minister asked the police and military to continue to work closely together to ensure the police can call on appropriate military assistance when required across the country. They also discussed the risk posed by firearms, agreeing that our existing tough firearms laws are a very important part of the protections we have and that we should step up our efforts with other countries to crack down on the illegal smuggling of weapons across borders, they said. Interception rules. After joining French President François Hollande, and more than 1 million people, for a unity rally in Paris on Sunday, Mr. Cameron said the UK was facing the same threat from the fanatical death cult of Islamist extremist violence. Prime Minister David Cameron was one of about 40 world leaders to join the unity rally in Paris. Prime Minister David Cameron was one of about 40 world leaders to join the unity rally in Paris. He stressed his determination to give the security services more powers to intercept the communications of terrorist suspects. Plans for a communications data bill, branded as Snoopers Charter by critics, were blocked by the Liberal Democrats, but Conservatives have signaled they will revive the legislation if they secure an overall majority in May's general election. Mr. Cameron said, "We do need to modernize our rules about interception. That is my very clear view, and if I am Prime Minister after the next election I will make sure we legislate accordingly." Line analysis by Gordon Cora, BBC security correspondent. The meeting with security and intelligence chiefs is being described as an operational briefing, focusing on events in France and ensuring that every step necessary is being taken to prevent anything similar happening here. As well as looking at protective security measures in the UK, there may also have been an attempt to understand if there are any lessons to be learned from the French decision to drop surveillance over the two Kouachi brothers 6 months ago when, reportedly, they were not judged an imminent danger. The issue of surveillance of communications, which has been politically contentious in the UK, may also have risen. In a speech last week, the head of MI5 Andrew Parker warned that the security service was seeing a growing threat from crude as well as more sophisticated mass casualty plots. He also said his greatest concern was a widening gap between this threat and a diminishing ability to intercept communications, as people turn to new internet-based technology. Line BBC Assistant Political Editor Norman Smith said it was unlikely that any new legislation would be announced in the wake of the Paris attacks. The balance of parliamentary opinion at the moment is that we have already given the security services a lot of additional powers and resources, he said. Appalling and terrible though Paris was, I don't think that has fundamentally changed the political consensus. Last week's attacks in France were on the offices of satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, police officers and a kosher supermarket. Some gaps. Meanwhile, the Joint Committee on Human Rights has raised some concerns about the government's counter-terrorism bill, which is due for its second reading in the House of Lords on Tuesday. It contains plans to block UK terror suspects returning to Britain and to impose a statutory obligation on universities to prevent people being drawn into terrorism. People gather in London's Trafalgar Square on Sunday the 11th of January to pay tribute to the victims of the terrorist attacks in Paris. people gathered in London's Trafalgar Square to pay tribute to the victims of France's terror attacks. The Human Rights Committee, which is made up of MPs and peers, says blocking the return of terrorist suspects from countries such as Syria would violate the human rights of British nationals even if it were enforced on a temporary basis. It also said including universities in a list of institutions required to crack down on extremism had implications for both freedom of expression and academic freedom. Immigration and Security Minister James Brokenshire said the government would carefully consider the committee's report. We believe the bill strikes the right balance in strengthening security whilst protecting civil liberties, he said.